That is so embarrassing. Okay, guys, I forgot to hit the record button. Long story short, gorgeous, wonderful audience. They're all dressed up to the nines. Landon Beach, Scott Brick, best writer, best narrator, face of the earth. Scott Brick is answering the first question, which is highlight of his career, low light of his career. For a moment, we thought Suzanne passed out, but no, she's okay. Take it, Scott.
It was a night when she fell asleep early, and I used the wrong
Okay.
word. She passed out. There was no drinking involved. We were at a conference, but she was fast asleep, and I'm a bit of a night owl anyway. So I checked my phone, and there's an email, and it said from my agent, offer dash Fikry, Fikry. And I was like, well, that reminds me of a book I did 7, 8 years ago by Gabrielle Zevin. The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, which was already in my top 5 books of all time.
Right.
It was deeply personal for me, and a wonderful, wonderful experience to work on. I couldn't believe I got it. When I read the email, come to find out they were making a movie of it. And Gabrielle Zevin, as the producer, said, I want Scott's voice on this. And so there's a moment where the main character is reading a book, and it's played by Kunal. The guy who played Raj in Big Bang Theory. I'm blanking on his last name. I wish I could
I'm
remember.
horrible with
But
names, so we know who Raj is.
so he opens this book. It's his favorite author, and the camera just turns, and you see his favorite author back in the 1930s as an old man plunking out these words on a manual typewriter, and it's my voice reading his.
Wow, I want to see it. Is it out? Can we get the
It's out.
movie?
It's available. I don't remember if they just called it Fikry, but I believe it's the Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, and it was the only time that that work I had done in the studio turned into work I did in for a studio.
I think that's amazing. And you like, so you really got to enter that world in a way, the world of the
Yeah,
book.
it was really wonderful. It was only about like a 30-second passage, maybe like 100 words. But knowing that I had a little something to do with it for the film was wonderful. And the director asked asked Gabrielle, we're going to have a voiceover for this guy's writing. What do you think he should sound like? And she just smiled and said, I think she should sound like Scott Brick. He
Brilliant.
should sound like Scott Brick. So that
Brilliant.
was a giddy moment for me. I have to be honest. I think the low point of my career was after an author that I did his debut novel for Blackstone Audio. He came over the night that I finished it and took me to dinner at my favorite restaurant here in town. I played him the last 10 minutes of the book, and he was sobbing. He was like, oh my God, this is perfect. I love it. And then he asked me to re-record it when it started getting bad reviews. And he even went so far as to ask Blackstone, and they put their foot down. And he kept sending me personal emails saying, I just don't get it. Maybe if you could just re-record this opening chapter, what they say is the character is really weak. I'm
That's
like,
sad.
in the opening
That's,
chapter, the main character is a kid. He gets the shit kicked out of him, and he cries 7 times on the way home from school. What do you want me to do?
but do you know what that is though? That's so sad, because I see that with the writers doing my research before I started the writers call. So maybe Landon can speak to this at some point. Is they have a conviction and they have a story, and then the minute the reviews come in, they lose themselves. They lose confidence in themselves, and they start scrabbling to like be what people will like, and they lose who they were. So something fine, something great, a meeting of 2 minds, 2 talents create something amazing that he loved, and then other people told him he didn't love it, and he lost that love. That's so sad.
Ultimately, I sent him an email and I said, this is the last time I'm going to discuss this. But for your own benefit, never change your writing because of a review.
Yeah,
People will
that's
hate
so
it.
sad.
There's reviews out there for audiobooks that God, the greatest narrators of all time, point to anybody that you love You know, George
Yeah.
Guidall, there's reviews out there that savage him. I certainly get my share of those. Nobody is universally beloved. Charlie Chaplin got killed in
Yeah.
film. You know, Bogart got killed in reviews. It happens. You're really going to change your style? I said,
It's
have faith in
sad,
yourself and in the work that was done, and then let it go.
but somebody had a choice. That was a path. That was a fork in the road, and they chose to take.
Mm.
That's sad.
Yeah.
And it's hard for you because you put your everything and it becomes personal. And that's interesting because I want to talk about that later when we talk about what we'd mentioned. We're going to talk about with Suzanne and the Zoom and your relationship with Landon as a writer. I think it's a really interesting thing to unpack. And I think it can be hugely beneficial for any narrators out there that are brand new. I'd like to save them. For me, I think it took 3 years before I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but even seasoned narrators, it can happen because it's a relationship business, isn't it?
It is. For those of you who know me, you know that, and Landon will tell you this, I'm a sports addict. I find a lot of corollaries between the world of sports. Yeah, look, sports were desegregated 15 years before our nation was, or our military, right? So
Yeah.
I take a lot of lessons from when things happen in sports. And there's a great quarterback out there now who's excelled all expectations, Jalen Hurts. He's not my quarterback. He plays for the Eagles, you know, but bless his heart, he's brilliant. But nobody expected him to be. And he had the most eloquent thing that I think you know, those moments where you hear something that you're like, I have felt like that my whole life, but I wasn't eloquent enough to put them into these words. He said the
Mm.
other day that he had a calling before anybody had an opinion.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I think that's what we all need as creative individuals, whether you're a narrator or a writer. Who cares? Who cares what the assholes think? People are always going to be ready to write some negative review. But if all you focus on is the calling and what you know you were born to be,
And back
wonderful.
yourself as well, because you know how I know my parents did this. My father loved company. And like a lot of families are like this. They want to impress the guests. They would never, everyone loved my parents. They would never do anything but like never really gave much thought to impressing like the kids. They're your family. Like I think we take
Hmm.
for granted the people that love us and that are close to us, and we give like the outside world's amazing. You know, they're all wonderful, the neighbors, the guests. And I think maybe we go to coaches and we look at reviews and we look at if publishers like us, but like, when's the last time you went in the booth and said, I'm really good? Or like Erin Moon listens to one of her books like every year.
Mm, good for her.
You know, when's the last time? When we don't ever do that. I don't do that. I think I've once
I,
listened.
I've done things like that occasionally. If I've had to re-record something, every now and again, a transfer doesn't make it from tape. When that's how long ago I've been doing this, folks. And every now and again, I will have to re-record something that I did 20 years ago. It happened just this last year. I had to redo parts of the Dune book, the original Dune books, and I hear myself. And the only reason I keep listening is because I sound so different. I sound like I didn't have a care in the world. I didn't know as much as I know now. In some ways, I I would love to redo every single one of those. But in other ways, I remember the
Yep.
fearlessness.
Oh
The
my God.
fearless
And the
being able to
happiness,
say,
because
yeah,
the joy,
yeah.
I'm missing the joy. The editing, I don't know. I mean, I did outsource. I don't know what some of the, I listened to some of the first books. I'm like, oh my God, no. But the joy, I could make people cry in a split second. The
Yeah,
joy,
yeah.
just from being new, you're feeling the joy.
Because you're not
And
worried about the reviews. You're not worried about
yeah,
what people are going to say. You're just doing it the way that you instinctively know this is supposed to be done.
yeah, you're not worried about like, oh my God, I've got to get 7 books done. Like,
Right.
you know, you're thinking, this person loves me.
Right.
Okay, I've milked this one question. So if it's okay, I'm going to pull Landon up on stage and let's find out the highlight of Landon's career and the low light of Landon's career.
Well, one thing I'll start off with, I looked at some of the audience members as they're on the screen here, and I've been on Zoom for a while. So I'm like, "Hey, hello, narrators. I love you all." And one in particular, Anne Sprinkle, who's on this call, is just an example of what you all were just talking about, of someone who enjoyed Narrator and reached out to me and was kind enough to leave a review, but just to give that positive feedback. And I think that that's something that I have tried to mold my business around, is that whenever I get into contact with another professional, is just to be positive. There's just too much negativity in the
Yeah.
world for it. And so, Anne from Medium, well, thank you. And it's great to be on with you, Daniela. I mean, for career highlights, a couple moments stand out, of course. One was when I finished the first draft of my very first novel. I'll never forget that particular moment. The other was when I received in the
Wait, wait,
mail.
wait, 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 wait. We're skipping ahead too far. So how did it feel? So like, did you put the pen down and do something, jump around the room, or how did it feel that moment?
To be honest, I was really emotional. I had tears and couldn't talk for a while. And it was a horrible novel. It was so bad, but I was so proud of making it to that moment. And that was back in 2003. So 20
Yeah.
years ago, when that first happened. And that has still never seen print. I still have it here at the house, and I look at it and I'm like, that's what started it all. But at the same time, you move on past those things. But
But
yeah.
the journey of self-belief and like who you became from starting it and ending it, would you ever go and rework the plot on that novel? We had a recent writer say that she picked up a novel she'd done when she was in high school and like created a real novel later in life.
Mm.
I've thought of doing that, because there's a lot in that book that I still like. Some of the ideas, as you and Scott were saying, that was when it was, quote, a hobby. And, I wasn't worrying about adding to our family's income like I'm a full-time writer now. So I would say, I'll jump forward and say last year when we were on this program, Narrator was the very first novel that I released when I had taken the plunge and become a full-time writer and a professional. And since then have started my own company, Landon Beach Books, LLC. And so it's really hard to look back and say, gosh, remember when there was no pressure to deliver and to have sales? Now you keep that in mind, but you still have to fight to maintain that vigor and that excitement of bringing your energy to the page, now that it's a business and you are responsible, to bring in money to the household. So that would be another moment, was when we were on this program, and after 19 years to finally be able to be in a position to go full time. That meant a lot, especially because it was with such a dear friend, and the experience that we went through to bring that book together. Another moment was, again, when I felt the proof in my hands the first time I had that. It was like, wow, this is kind of a real book. And then when Gina put a preview of Scott reading The Wreck, which would have been, my gosh, 4 years ago now, and it was the first time I ever heard my words spoken. That I still remember where I was at, what I heard, and that got me really interested into the art and science of narration. And that might have been, the seed that was planted of possibly the origins of Narrator one day, because I said, wow, that's really something. And all I had ever heard my book was in my own mind and my own characters and what I thought they sounded like. And then to hear a professional, a master of his craft, devote his time and energy to bring that, to be, was just something different. But a long answer, it would be probably the moment, though, of the career was, I think, when I got to meet Scott at the Audies, and we got to see.
That's the first time you guys got to meet.
Yeah.
In person. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And I've had people ask me, they're like, were you nervous? You've never met this guy before, you've never seen someone in person. And I said, no, I'm not. I said, because even though it's Zoom, we had so many genuine moments of talking and being honest with each other. I never doubted it for a second. And that one night, first, I was practicing because I was asked to be a presenter during the ceremony. I don't know how that happened, but I got up there, and then Scott and Suzanne walked through and just walked over and had a big hug, and the rest is history. And it was like we'd known each other forever. But even though, the book didn't win, I remember when it went up on, and it's such a subjective business, there could have been 5 other narrators, 5 other books, 500 other narrators, 500 other books that could have been up there, but you take what you can get, right? And so I remember seeing that go up on the overhead, and I wasn't thinking about winning or anything else at that moment. What I was thinking about was all the work that went in to bring that, make that happen. The writing and the interview that Scott and I did, and then the back and forth and the tremendous, lengths he went to, and his energy to make that happen.
The journey, the goal is empty. If you reach the goal without the journey, what is it? It's the journey.
It was a memory of that. It was a memory of that really came forward. So yeah, that was a highlight. That was really special. In terms of a low, so I was a screenwriter before I was a novelist, and I still like to write screenplays, and I have always envisioned trying to get something to the screen. And in India, it's really difficult if you don't have an agent. The old adage about Hollywood is that within their walls, they're screaming out, we need talent, we need people, we need contributors, and yet it's closed and no one can get in. And it's this dichotomy, and irony about it. But my low point was I finally got into contact with an agent, and I said, well, at least I finally made it to this level. And then that agent, who was passed on Narrator, and to be that close, was like, oh my gosh, to finally get there.
And it feels personal, doesn't it? Because it's the same with publishers. The publishers are all, we're open, new people come to us, we love you, anyone, please, we love you. And then you send emails every 8 weeks for however long. It's personal.
I think everyone in the room here knows that it's difficult to decipher messages that are given back to you, where, I've seen every form rejection letter that you can possibly see in 19 years. So I know what those look like. But when this guy, who is in his later 70s, and no ageism, intended here at all, but his reason for rejecting it was he said that he couldn't identify with a narrator in his mid-30s. And so I just found that very awkward as the only one line of why he couldn't. But again, in this business, I've learned too that when you find someone, you want that person to be 100% behind you and to believe in it. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I did find an agent who was behind it. And now Narrator is in front of 30 studios and producers.
And so it's going in the public eye, isn't it? Like Sex and the City had a Narrator.
It had a happy ending, but it was a low moment right before it turned on a dime 2 weeks later.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So this was queries. You were sending out queries, is that right? And that's how you were getting the rejections? Because I hear all these writers say, I've sent 69 queries, I've had good feedback, I've won contests, and I've been rejected 69, 70 times. That's it, I'm giving up. And somebody would say to them, why don't you self-publish? And they said, I can't go down that route now. And I still don't understand, why can't they go down that route? Why is it impossible? They act like it's impossible. It seems like really obvious way to go.
I wonder if they're, forgive me, Landon, I don't mean to interrupt, but I wonder if they're looking for an easy way out. That they thought traditional publishing would be the way to go, and because that way they've got editors working on their behalf, they don't have to deal with that. They've got the proofers on their behalf, they don't have to worry about that. They're handling the distribution, they're putting it out into libraries. And I wonder if after so many rejections, what they're thinking is, this is just too much work, I can't do this. I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's how it sounds to me, but I'm just like, you see the Landon Beaches out there, you
Yeah.
see the Dan Padavanas, they're like, they're sweeping the market. Like, why would you not want to look toward the people that are doing it right? As Landon, do you have an answer to that for us?
My answer would be for whoever that writer is and other
It's
writers as well,
tons.
is to go for it. I just used the example, that my wife gave me, and she just said it was when she threatened to publish that first book behind my back. And she said, you may not know this, but the publishing world is changing. It's changed. Traditional publishers, in some ways, are on life support because they're being forced to compete in their avenues. And again, you're always going to have good and bad products out in the marketplaces, and there will be anomalies where you look at things, whether it's an audiobook or a book, and you're like, how is that successful? And then you look at others that are absolutely, in your own opinion, phenomenal and wonderful that don't make it. And we all say, how could that not make it? And so there aren't any easy answers there, but you'll never know if you don't put your work out there. And there are avenues available to writers now that they have never had before. And you can only be yourself and what your own company is and your own product that you're putting out. And there are a variety of different products that indies put out, and there are a variety of products that traditionally published authors put out. And so it's really, how do readers and people that enjoy escapist fiction react to what you do? And so the same way that you and Scott very empathetically said, that you can't worry about reviews, I don't worry about who I'm competing against. I just worry about what I am trying to create and the experience for my readers in that way. And so the answer to the other question was, I was sending out some queries to a few specific, there are not very many of them, because it's not a literary agent at this point. It's just someone who is a film agent who represents books to film and has a connection to Hollywood. And then through a couple, contacts that I had, a few avenues opened up where I was able to get into contact with one, and then to even have them look at your work. So, I mean, there are so many stairs to climb, to even get to that point that can just drag you down. But I stuck with it. And then even after that low point, I just would not give up. And I landed someone who I'm very happy with, and we're in 2 strikes right now, so everything is kind of on pause, and for good measure too. This is an inflection point, I think, in the history of creative arts right now. Yeah, bless you, Scott, bless you, brother, right there. And
Been walking the lines.
in terms of
you heard the Zoom
things that
thing.
make us human.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you heard the Zoom thing that came out recently where they were like, Zoom is now saying that their terms and agreements are that they can use the audio on any Zoom call to train AI. And
I heard
they had to but evidently you have to sign up for the new features or something first. I hope they had some strongly worded emails from me going, hello, you cannot use, I do not agree. And then writers, I saw some writers, I don't know if Landon's heard of this, or even Scott, but saying that they had people using their name and putting books out under their name on Amazon, and Amazon won't take them down because you can't copyright your name.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a writer who someone was using her name, and there were a bunch of books that were generated by ChatGPT and being sold.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, which again, that gives a black eye to indies that someone would do that, but for anyone ethically to do that. But yes,
they're going to find a solution. They can't just let that go because that'll have to fix itself. That's not going to just stand.
Yeah, you're right.
But
I
what I
have
love
my
about you, Landon, is Landon leads with creativity. It's what PJ told me. I'd rather be a creator than a destroyer or a consumer. I can't remember his exact words. You lead with creativity. You present yourself to the world with your creations. Right around you are your books. Right. I mean, and it's not just in a promotional way, though. You wake up proud of your work. You show up proud of your work. You identify as Landon. This is my work I'm creating. Look what I'm putting out into the world that's a positive thing. Scott, you do that in your relations with narrators. I mean, obviously with your work as well. I mean, top level work, everything you touch. But you could do that and be a jerk, but you don't. You take the time to know the human being behind everything, and you create rather than destroy. Right? I mean, I think that's what I admire about the two of you the most.
I,
That's a
I think I
closed-ended
can speak for
question,
us both that life just isn't worth being tearing other people down.
right?
You know, I look, we've talked about bad reviews, we've talked about, low points. The very first tweet I ever read about myself, and this was really early on, it was right when it debuted. I hadn't even signed up for, at Scott Brick yet. But my best friend said, you should look it up and see if people are there talking about you. And I didn't even know how the hell this worked. But I plugged in my name, and up came a tweet that said, I hope Scott Brick gets throat cancer and dies so he stops ruining good books.
Wow.
And that's before I even had an account. And I just thought life is too short.
Yeah.
It just is. There are, I work for certain series that, other authors have taken over, and they will get reviews from, the anti, and then they list their names. That's their handle. These people have visualized themselves. They identify as a person who hates this author.
Because they don't think they're good enough to create.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what? I don't think I ever enjoyed a Bruce Willis film other than the Die Hard movies.
Yeah,
But
but you don't think you're going to chase him to give him bad.
I bumped into him at dinner a number of times, and never in a million years would I walk up to him and say, I thought, Bonfire of the Vanities was shit. It's because life is just too short.
Yeah.
And if he would have ever brought up, Die Hard was a lot of fun, I'd be like, great, let's engage at that. Tell me about your good time. Tell me how you created such good work. That's what matters in life.
Yeah. And then you probably would have watched it again and thought, it's not as bad as I initially. I mean, but they're like dripping poison into their own veins.
Yeah.
Because that isn't healthy. It's so in the vein of going towards positive things. I got an email from Landon before this call saying that he had this experience, this wonderful, and I can't say enough about Suzanne. I'm like a massive Suzanne fan. So, but it brought up an interesting topic because I've been talking to a lot of new narrators. I get messages just because of the call and everything. And I remember this from when I started, the creating boundaries, how you want to be friendly and give good customer service. And it's also part of your business model, giving good customer service. But I think the biggest life-changing lesson I learned that changed my career was when I finally, it came way too late. I had to be hit on the head quite a few times before I learned it. But was when I finally learned that I had to have a strong business foundation, i.e., if I'm going to work with an indie writer or a writer outside a publisher, I know what I deliver, I know who I am, and my thing, more extreme than maybe others, is I will deliver, I will work really hard with you to get that 15-minute sample exactly. I'll try to interpret the voices in your head. And if you don't like it, I'll do it over again. If you still don't like it, I think we should consider parting ways, because we're not going to be happy, and you're never going to hear from me once I start narrating until the book's done. So there's an element of trust and letting go. And some writers are easy and they understand. And I've had Zooms, and it's a meeting of the minds, which is what I'll let Landon speak to his experience with you and with Suzanne. But some writers don't understand, and you can tell they haven't read, they haven't really listened. They're not, it's their baby. What are you asking them to do? They really want you to change. Could you please change that pause on page 322? They're not sure what's wrong with it. Should be maybe a little shorter, a little longer. And I'd like to hear the experience of the working relationship but I preface this for any new people starting narrating. Once you have the foundation of your business and you are a confident narrator and you are the expert guiding the writer by the hand, you're in charge of the audiobook, and you need to be the expert, because this won't work if you jump on Zoom calls, in my opinion, and you're asking for permission and direction. It can go horribly wrong. This is my opinion. Scott, let's start with Scott, and then I'd love to hear Landon's experience, because I've got you on the screen, Scott, and also you might disagree with me. That's just my experience. You don't work with a lot of indie writers, do you?
I'm doing it a lot more now than I ever did before. I had a couple of really great experiences, and I want to credit Gina Smith, my production manager, for helping find them. Basically, when they found us, Gina's saying, yeah, say yes to this one. Let's be honest. But in the past, I had nightmarish experiences. I had one guy who paid me for 6 hours instead of 12. And this was a guy from my church. You figure you could trust anybody, you know. And this is a guy who just walked across the aisle and said, hey, could you do my book? And then basically tried to stiff me on it. I tracked down his wife, and I basically shamed him into paying it.
Wow. That's the
one
good thing about finding him through your church. Shame is the root that'll work.
I was I'm just like, here he is and here she is. I'm looking at him, but I'm talking to her saying, any reason why this guy hasn't paid me yet?
Wow, that's brilliant.
She's horrified. Anyway, but I'm ruthless. I'm a nice guy, I swear. Just don't mess with me.
And also the amount of energy and time and angst and focus. You could have done another book in the time it took dealing with that.
I had another experience doing a book of short stories for an author who we became friends. He's a really nice guy. But at one point, there's the scene where a high-price fashion photographer is working with the richest model in the world. You imagine it's like some waifish British guy, working with Giselle Bundchen, and he's got these words, this dialogue that says, "That's it, baby. Yeah, yeah. Make love to the camera. That's it. Yeah, yeah." So, that was Austin Powers had just come out, and so I just said, "That's it, baby. Yeah, that's right. Make love to the camera. Yeah, baby. Yeah." And he happened to be in the studio that day, and I swear to God, he stops me. He puts his hand on the talkback button and says, is he British?" And I said, "Well, that's the way I was doing it." Right. And I'm going to cut all the pauses down because this took almost 5 minutes to determine. He's like, "Well, I'm looking, and I just don't see any reference in any of the pages here that he's British." And I said, "Yeah, he's only got this one line, and he's only in this one scene, and I know what the fuck I'm doing, so how about you just let me do it?" Okay?
And you also didn't mention this when you hired me.
And so from that point on, I was skittish when authors started coming to me, because I thought they were going to try to direct me. And I welcome direction when I'm working with somebody in the booth, but being directed after the fact is very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I had come up with like boilerplate agreements, and but I never was a stickler for them. if occasionally an author is going to tell me, yeah, I think, let's put it this way, the two best independent authors I've ever gotten to work with, Michael Gremley and Landon. And both of them, whenever there was an issue, they would come back and they would say, well, here's what is going on, and maybe you might have missed this. And basically just, saying, look, this is in your hands, but they basically, they don't abuse the relationship. They don't.
When it's good, it can be really good, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
Don't direct
lifelong
me in the
friends.
rearview mirror.
Yeah. I've got some writers that are my friends forever. I would do anything for them.
Absolutely.
And I've kind of stolen one of your writers because I consider Landon a friend. I've never even worked with them. But but some writers are like that because it's two people creating that respect each other. That right?
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, here's the thing. Brad Meltzer said a wonderful thing at one point. Somebody was doing a piece about me, and they called up Brad and they asked for a quote, and he said, I look at our relationship much the same way that I would imagine Sir Elton John and Bernie Taupin would look at theirs. One handles the lyrics, the other handles the melody. And he says, Scott trusts me with the words. I trust him with the melody. And I think ultimately that's what is going to create a good relationship, what might come down to a good relationship. I trust Landon implicitly. And if there's ever an issue, he knows he can come to me. And if there is an issue with the melody, by all means, bring it up. Just, don't give me 30 pages of notes, right? Because
but it also in the booth, because that guy that had the thing about the British accent, did that not color the way you felt narrating the whole rest of the book? Like the feeling of
completely.
He's going to disapprove of this. He's not going to like this.
I didn't even think about whether he wouldn't like any other interpretation that I did from that point on, because he was there. It was a 3-day job. He was there the whole time. He flew out for it. So how could I say no? And I had never had this happen, so I had no nightmare stories to influence me whether it should happen or not. And all I remember thinking wasn't he's going to object to this. It was that he doesn't trust me.
Yeah, it's like being in a bad relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in a play, and the director in London, the day before we went on, the writer from America flew over to watch it. And she decided that she wanted us to do it an entirely different way than he wanted us to do it. And
really?
She started changing all the direction, like while we're standing there the day before opening, like deer in the headlights.
Oh, dear
yeah,
God.
We did it his way.
Good.
Because I'm sorry, he's the director, and we've been.
Yeah, he was the one hired to interpret the thing. I'm going to shut up after this. I swear to God, because
no, don't shut up.
Well, it's just that Yuri Rozovsky was a wonderful director in audiobooks, and sadly, he's been gone for 10 years now. But he talked about the difference between reading the print version, the Dead Tree version, if you will. And I'm a big fan of those. You can see right behind me. He said, during those days when all there were the author's words on the page, and then your interpretation of them in your mind. The only thing in between were your eyes. Now, when you have to go through the ears, now you've got the author's words and the interpretation in the mind of the listener, but in between you have one other step, and that's the construct, is what he used to call it. He said, you are interpreting the words so the listener can interpret them again. Yeah. And I do my best to make my interpretation as small as possible, so that the thing you notice the most is the words, not what I'm doing with them.
The energy behind your voice, your energy.
Absolutely. Or, an interpretation of it like, yeah, baby, yeah, make love to the camera. That's right. That's an interpretation. And they either trust you or they don't. Our job, all of us here in this room, we are being hired. We get hired because people trust us. And if you get an indication, a red flag that relationship is troubled, or that trust doesn't exist, then that's the moment when you have to adjust.
But I think it's so important, and I definitely want to. I'm going to bring Landon on in a second too, because I don't want to drift off the subject. I want to hear what Landon's going to say about Suzanne. But I think the crucial thing that I wish I understood when I started as a narrator, in my effort to give great customer service, I didn't understand. I thought that my confidence level would come. I was a new narrator, I just started. I thought my confidence level was my problem. But what I didn't understand was my confidence level was part of my business package. So I have to come across as extremely confident, even if I've done one book, because they're putting something in my hands. And why would you hire a plumber that says he's pretty sure he can find the pipes? You know what I mean? And he would be open to all my feedback about where the pipes, and if I think he should be doing it that way. It's what Nancy Peterson said about her rate. Why would you hire a plumber and then squabble about the rate? My rate is my rate. My job is my job. This is my process. I completely understand if you would prefer to go somewhere else, but I would love to work with you.
If somebody has $1,000 job and they take a bunch of bids, and they're all generally maybe between $850 and $1,150 in the same ballpark. Somebody else comes in and says, I can do it for $3. They get what they deserve.
Yeah.
They take that part. You get what you pay for.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Confidence. My dear friend Pat Fraley, one of my closest friends, we've been teaching together for 10 years. And he and I, whenever we get together for lunch or dinner, we shake our heads and we think, if instead of focusing on third-person narrative and first-person narrative and character voices or whatever it is that we want to focus on during a particular class, we always say, if we could just curricularize confidence, we would never teach another class again.
But do you not think, I haven't forgotten you, Landon, I promise, but recently.
This is why I need to shut the hell up.
No, but this is such an insightful thing you just said.
It was a master class. Listen to my friends.
Well, because I've been looking at finances for a business, and I think that I've been fascinated by confidence and mindset, and how do you channel the confidence going into the booth. But I am now realizing, the more I've been sharing my welcome pack, please have a welcome pack if you're going to work with indie authors. That's your storefront for your business. When I was sharing my welcome pack, I realized that confidence isn't, I just have to look in the mirror and tell myself I'm happy, gorgeous, skinny, and a good narrator. That's not confidence. Confidence comes from, I've set up my business so that I'm pretty sure I know what's going on with my income, and I've done the hard things and checked the bank. I know what template letters to use to send out to publishers, so I'm kind of in control of that. I have a welcome pack, and I know exactly what I will stand for in my business. And if I don't know, I'll borrow one from another narrator and get one together. Anyone with one book can do all those things. And that's confidence. I might not be there yet, but I know these are the legs of my business. And I'm here because I think I've got something to deliver. And look at my other work. Do you like me? Great. I knew you would. So speaking of relationships, and I think you are unique, Landon, in that you're kind of like a narrator, like mentally. And I can tell you from doing writers' shows, it's different interviewing writers than narrators. Except for you're kind of like one of us. I don't know how, but so I think you've always been simpatico. But so let's look, Scott and I talked about from the side of, you don't know the writer and you have to present your business and you have to be the boss. Now let's look at when it can all go really well. and you develop a relationship with the writer. From the writer's point of view, you were talking about a Zoom call you had and that you always do it with Scott, but you recently had one with Suzanne. Can you tell me what you got from that, how that went, and what the benefit of that was?
Sure. May I add on to a few things that you and Scott talked about?
Add everything you'd like.
Okay. Thank you. One thing, and this will sound self-serving, but it is not meant to be, but I did have a few author friends who did check out Narrator, and those of you in the room that have listened to it or read it know that part of that was my love letter to storytelling and the things that I learned that go into making an audiobook come to life from the narrator's perspective. And a couple of them did come back to me and said, I was about to send something nasty to my narrator, but I listened to that book and heard all of the things that they have to do to make this book come alive and the art and science behind it.
Yeah.
And it changed their perspective on that. And so sometimes, you know, that's where a lot of my respect grew even more, was researching that book and how ignorant I was about the whole process. And the other thing too is I tell some authors just to chill out, because you'll never, ever, ever find the narrator who is going to bring the voices that were in your head for months exactly the way you heard them in your own mind. It's a fallacy and it doesn't exist, and you have no right to expect that someone else would be able to mimic that perfectly. I like to use the Hemingway analogy where he talked about Hollywood, where he said, you know, here's how you don't get emotional about films that are made of your novels. Hollywood is this wall, and as a writer, you walk up to this wall, you look up at it, you throw your book over the top of it, you wait about 5 seconds, and they throw a bag of money back at you. And he said, turn away and walk away and be happy. And it's a loss of control. And so for me, I always knew I was in good hands with who I was working with. And I also use the analogy too of those of us Generation Xers that got to see Star Wars in the theater the first time. And there are some of ours that, gosh, you know, I don't know, they become just mean, or their expectations are so high, but they saw the new Star Wars and they just try to rip it to shreds because they're trying to compare it to this nostalgic experience that no one can recreate of what we had 30 or 40 years ago. So when I went into the latest Indiana Jones movie, I had a blast. I loved it. It was to see Indy one more time. I knew that it would not be like when I saw Raiders and Temple of Doom. You know, it's just so, you know, adjusting your expectations that way, but also too, to know that you're in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing and they have a passion and they're really good at it. And, you know, that kind of respect, I think. So if any,
but wait, before you, can I stop you on this one before you go further? Because right there, what you said, because if you go into the new Indiana Jones and only compare it to the old and expect the old, how are you getting new experiences? If you're not open to anything, you're like, everything's got to be compared to something else, then you're living in the past, aren't you?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's all about our expectations in life, and as creators, you know, you want so much control, but you have to be able to let go and to see what's possible. And again, when I did that and I heard Scott perform my first couple novels, you know, it was better than what I had in my mind in a lot of instances, because you know, you go into it not knowing enough about the whole industry and what happens. And so, you know, be delighted with that and, you know, cherish those relationships. And I always used to do this with my students. I used to hate group work in high school. We can all raise a hand when we were in that group and we're like, no, don't put us in a group, because someone's going to dominate the group and someone's not going to do anything and someone's going to get offended and someone's going to have to do everything at the last minute. So what I did at the beginning of every year was I had all of my students, and I don't think that this is the be all end all for everything, but it was definitely a move you can make to help people collaborate and hear each other and listen. And I had them take the Myers-Briggs personality test. And so we broke down the difference between being an introvert and an extrovert, a thinker and a feeler, someone who's more practical and someone who's more intuitive, and someone who's organized and someone who is a shoot first, aim later. And a lot of what I found in group work and collaboration in general was that they didn't know each other's strengths or how they were. And so you'd get a feeler in the group who would have someone think, say something that they thought was insensitive, but it was really a thinker who wasn't trying to be mean. It was just that's how they process information. And so it allowed people to collaborate and more coordination. And so I do think that if you can kind of extend that analogy to when you're an author and a narrator and you've built a certain level of trust and learning how you respond to different things, then there's more that's possible. But if it's just that's one thing about traditional publishing, is that a lot of my friends who are traditionally published authors, they never see their narrator, they never talk to their narrator, they have their book, they don't even find out who their narrator is until the book is about to come out. And so there's not an opportunity for that. So I revel in the ability that I have to be able to get to know the narrator, Scott, and narrators, because Suzanne is going to be a book that's coming up that is not possible for a lot of other narrators. But I think that if you can apply some of those general guidelines, I think that there would be more of an awareness and more of an appreciation for what you all do in the booth as professionals and artists. And I think that's how I think about that when I think of a piece of art that is going to be made into a different piece of art by someone else who is an artist and creator. That's what the lane that I've always put it in.
Yeah. I think it's an important distinction. So working with Suzanne, you met first. You already met at the awards, hadn't you, before you started discussing the book, or did you meet to discuss the book before you met in person?
Sort of tangentially before, when I introduced her as a character in one of my books as a narrator of this mythical series, and she actually narrated a line in the intro and the outro for Huron Breeze. And I thought there's a real possibility here that I could tell the story within the story and do a standalone book that still shares DNA with the main trilogy. And I thought, of course, this will be Suzanne will actually, because she's the narrator in the book for the fictional book, that she would be the narrator for this. And then I thought, from such a positive experience with Scott, and again, all the rules go away when you're in indie and you can just see what's possible. And I thought, because Suzanne was going to be performing the book, what would happen if I reached out to her before I had written anything? And
I didn't realize it was before you had written anything.
And so I thought, why not show her that amount of respect for someone who has read a million thrillers and action novels and performed a bunch of them, and see what she might have to say, because she's going to be performing the novel. So these were sort of a couple of the questions that I asked her. Is there a type of scene in an action espionage novel that you have always wanted to narrate? And let her answer that before I've written it, and see what I could come up with. Because then
I never even knew this. She never even told me this. I can't believe I'm hearing this.
Well, I can't believe she didn't tell you. My mouth would have hit the floor if somebody asked me that before they'd written the book.
Actually, it's because Scott came in at the end. It wasn't out in public yet, but Suzanne showed me the engagement ring, and then literally all of a sudden, it's like Scott goes, popped his head in the booth. I'm like,
right, yeah.
Damn it, congratulations. So he missed all of this part, but
yeah, I didn't get that part. I only came in at the end to take credit for the ring. That's all I did.
He's like, buddy, are we getting together for the next book? He's like, oh, good. And then there's a little clink of his glass of scotch, and then he vanished. So I said, what are some things that you would like to see from an Adrian Astrid origin story? What are the must-haves for an origin story from your perspective? What might be some eye roll moments for readers or listeners when experiencing this type of book? And then the last one was, what do you need from me to help you find Adrian's truth? And again, that whole pre-writing.
Oh, see, now you're just kissing up.
Now you're just showing off.
That's too good to be true.
I'm not trying to
I'm
blow
just,
smoke at any.
I'm joking. I'm completely joking. I think it's lovely and generous and thoughtful that you thought of those questions. And I bet Suzanne was in shock because it's
Yeah, it
very
was.
considerate. It's unbelievable.
So my whole thought of it was because again, you're rewriting the rule book, being an indie and working with top flight narrators, and for her to be generous enough to even agree to say, "Hey, I'm game for it. Let's have this pre-writing conference." Because Scott and I always do the pre-recording conference, except for the time when I asked him some questions about narrating. But it wasn't in that vein. It was more I needed to know what his thought process was in the booth when I interviewed him before I started writing some scenes for Narrator. But
Can I just, what an honor, and you've reminded me of something that I've forgotten, and I actually should reach out and tell this person. One of my writers, after my father died, I was like, I became obsessed with time travel, go figure. Why don't we just go back? And I mentioned it to her, because I was like obsessed. I'd run out of time travel audiobooks to listen to. And she wrote a time travel book, a beautiful one. And it was one of the favorite books I've ever narrated my entire life. And the timing was a godsend. And there's like a magic in the air. And I know this sounds really woo-woo, but there is a magic in the air when I think two people work together to create like that. Like I can feel the magic when you talking to Suzanne and you're going to go off and create this amazing thing and then she's going to go and perform it. And that's how I felt. There is a book out there that it's like out of stardust because it's created from this writer's beautiful soul and generosity and brilliance. I don't know how she turned it around. Do you know what I mean? And that's what you did for Suzanne. And that's what you do working with Scott, the two of you as a team, creating something as powerful as Narrator. I mean, that book was next level. And I don't know if I ever said, because oh God, I am the worst person at writing reviews in the world because I want to say so much and it never seems good enough, right? But beyond the unbelievable writing, Scott, next level, the narrating. I mean, the book was special. And I think that what you're saying, that respect and curiosity and openness is the magic ingredient, don't you think?
I think that again, Scott and I have always said about Narrator, we were never here to sell the book, but what we were here to sell was the relationship that can take place if things work out. And, that didn't happen until we got to be friends because the first three novels that he narrated were very much in the traditional, hey, Scott, seemed like a good guy. Hey, Landon, all right, dude, I'm going to go record these. And, they were wonderful and we sent them out. And then, we had that one dinner with someone who had won one of the contests and then became, a genuine friendship developed from that, which led to Narrator and the trust to be able to go into a place that, that's very much, on Scott's turf is narration. And I'm scared to death because I'm a writer and I don't want to get it wrong. And I really want to write something that is worthy of this and entertaining. But that led to me even saying with Suzanne, why not make the narrator feel more part of the process from the very beginning? Who knows what that'll do, to her performance when she records this the week of September 18th, coming up soon. And, there are opportunities because of what she told me in the beginning. It was always in the back of my mind. And I wrote some scenes that I would have never written before. And it wasn't just because she said that, it was, I never thought of that. And I think there are opportunities in this book. I mean, the main villain here is a shipping tycoon who does horrible things to people all over the world, but he's trying to actually physically become the actor Richard Burton. And to see what she can do with that as a James Bond-like villain. And
you seem like such a nice guy, Landon. I don't know where you get these thrillers from. I think you've got like a dark side.
Every writer does.
Oh.
It's like Scott and I are like, it's payback time.
He's got a list of people that have pissed him off.
Change their last name by a few letters. Oh, I'm sorry you got eaten by that wolf.
Hey, I
But
know
it was
I know of narrators who work almost exclusively in erotica, and they don't work under their own name. And I was with her one time. She said, she says, I've got the perfect narrator pseudonym. And they said, oh, what was it? And I honestly, I can't say who it is because I, don't
Right,
want to out her.
don't.
But so instead I'll come up with an analog from my life. I said, Christina McMullen. And somebody was like, oh, that's really nice. It sounds real. It doesn't sound like a porn name, right? And she said, how did you come up with it? And she just smiled sweetly and said, that's the girl who was really mean to me in school. So I just love that, because it's like, yeah, payback. Oh yeah.
I love that. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So there are a whole bunch of really X-rated books with her name. So if you Google her,
Imagine a classmate of hers 40 years after the fact going, hey, whatever happened to Christina? Ooh, she'd work on a lot of porn.
know her. You mean the porn narrator?
uncomfortable moments at class reunions, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I rescind the porn comment. Erotica is not porn, but yes, it's same.
But you know what? And is it because porn has connotations? Is it because I don't, the word porn doesn't bother me at all. So I quite probably stuck my foot in it.
It bothers
does it bother erotica people?
Yeah.
Oh.
Suzanne included. She's like, I don't work in porn.
Note to self, edit this section out.
Yeah. I'd like to just touch back on something that you both had said. And this is going back to all the way at the beginning. Daniela, you spoke about the welcome pack, right?
Yes.
What you offer to somebody new to working with you.
Yes.
Landon spoke about working with his students on the Myers-Briggs testing. I am so fascinated by this because when it came time to assessing my own work relationship and exerting confidence through what I present to people, one of the things I relied on was Myers-Briggs. Because my best friend has been doing that testing for years, but he applies it to the business world. You got that phrase, too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
That's because every successful restaurant needs one cook. They need one sous chef. They need a handful of servers. They need somebody to work the front of the house. They need an accountant to do the books. They need, there's a lot of individual roles, but you can't all be cooks. So that's what Richard does, is he applies Myers-Briggs to the workspace and says, right. Well, you're good with numbers, but you're not good with creativity. This person is great at the creative side, coming up with PR things, but sucks at numbers. You two should work together. And that's what I have done when I've been creating my model, my business role. The reason that I have Gina Smith working for me is because I stink at the follow through, at the sending off the invoices, handling the deposits, investing it the proper way. I stink at, look, there's a number of things that I don't do well in my life. I don't do taxes well. I don't know what to do with my yard, and I'm not good at cleaning my own house. But I hire people who are good at those things. And you know what? The day that my taxes are done, the 2 or 3 hours it takes to do a professional for him to do them, I'm in my booth. I'm doing another book.
And the trick, you're right, is knowing who you are and what, because I ignored it for a long time. I've done the Myers-Briggs, and of course I'm a big horoscope, whatever, I'm from LA, but the Enneagram, and the Enneagram thing went right by me because nothing really spoke to me. And then I heard a podcast, Austin had told me about it, but then Emily Stewart brought a podcast to my attention, and it was different. And all of a sudden, I heard Enneagram 3. I was like, oh my God, because it explained, because I can interview people, I can tune in to their feelings immediately. I'm an expert at feelings, but I don't do feelings. I throw them away. I don't do feelings. I like acknowledge them and goodbye, and then get on and do the work. So I can do a lot of work, but just
Yeah.
I don't like the other stuff. And I was like, oh my God, it's not just me. I'm not like a freak. There's power in recognizing yourself, isn't there?
I think there is. Landon, you probably worked with this a lot more personally than I have, but in Myers-Briggs, basically, all the quadrants, they're either a strength or a weakness. You can be up at 20, you can be down at 1, but you
Yeah.
have at least some of all 4 of them.
Yeah.
Well, I just look and see what are my highest, what are my lowest. I make sure to hire people there who can complement the work that I do.
I'm gonna look at
Friend
that
of
again.
Well, and I think one of the things too is, like, I'll give you an example with extroverted and introvertedness with an E or an I, the first letters in the Myers-Briggs. And it's not so much that introverts don't like to be around people, it's that they recharge their batteries when they're in solitude by themselves. And extroverts, it's not that they just want to go off and be a loner, but we recharge our batteries when we get in a group with people, and that's how we energize. And so, to make a long story short, with students, once they all took that test, and then when we had group work for the rest of the year, the first thing they would do is share what their 4-letter code was. And so when you had someone who's really organized and likes to come up with the plan, they would respect the person who was more the shoot first, aim later, but they respected that they're really good troubleshooters. And so they would start to work together and say, well, you come up with some of the plan and I might help us adjust it as we go along. And it's so much better to use those tools, when you do that. And what you said, Daniela, I do want to make that point that you told me to make, that I want to make sure I do. And that is that what I have with Suzanne and with Scott, that is not something that I would ever recommend that a first-time author, would reach out to a narrator and say, hey, let me give you all my great ideas for you in the booth. I mean, that comes with experience and trust, but you might talk about it a little bit and say, what would we like this book to be, and what are you open to? And the magic line, I think, that I found with Scott for sure is that, and Suzanne and I already sent this email to her too, is that me doing the work as an author to know all the things that are embedded in the different layers that I put into a work, and sending an email that has links to those to say, hey, if you'd like to use this to influence your performance, great. If you want to throw it away and do what you're going to do,
That's
but
hugely
then I never
helpful.
have to worry about. Then I don't go, why didn't I say anything? Or like Scott instantly has made me feel a part of the process, and yet he still has the complete autonomy to do what he does best, which is not what I do.
You're just communicating as much as you can. I've had a writer send me Pinterest boards and playlists, and I have a playlist for every song, every book I do. I have a different playlist. It's because I like to get myself in the mood, whatever. But I think Scott, that was it when I was talking about the legs of the business table that you have to have in shape. If something like that, whether it's Myers-Briggs, whatever way you can find, but whatever you can find so that you know yourself better. So, I mean, I found that hugely freeing. For me, it was the Enneagram recently, because society tells you to be a certain way and everyone wants you to feel your feelings, which, I can think of nothing worse. And it was just lovely to read something where it was like, you're never going to change who you are. This is who you are. Or just, in that form, just, I think whatever you can do to be more self-aware. And then you can get the magic spot of the Landon Beach, Scott Brick, the magic, right? Because that's what we all want. That's what we, I've got, if audiobooks fall to the ground and shatter, and Audible, God forbid, gets rid of all of them and robots take over the planet, I will still have my 6 or 7 writers that I've been through this all, that are my dear, like, isn't that at the end of the day, they're your friends.
Yeah. I've got authors that I've either never worked with or worked with but never met, never spoke to, who are friends of mine.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that helps us all as you develop a relationship, and everybody out there, as you work with an author for the first time, maybe through the relationship that Landon and I and Suzanne have, you can see where that might go, is that if, are you able to build that kind of trust? Can you go back and forth? I mean, well, look, I mean, one author I feel like a friend of mine is Frank Herbert, and I never met him. I never narrated an audiobook until 13 years after he died. But I worked with his son. And his son has shared all of his memories with me. He actually trusted me with his the biography he wrote of his father, the biography of Frank Herbert, which is called Dreamer of Dune, and trusted me with it to publish myself as an audiobook. The book came out 20 years ago, but I just published it myself. And I'm like, you know what? I've worked in 25 volumes of this series, and I never knew the author. But because
it's a connection.
Yeah, because of the connection I'd made with Brian, and through Brian to his father, I'm like, look, if nothing, as you say, if the robots wind up taking over the world, and believe me, that is not what Dune is about. Dune is about getting rid of the thinking machines. I would still have that.
And you could get a robot to clean your house, which would work. I
won't say
with the Myers-Briggs thing.
Right.
But the thing is also, I mean, because it still astounds me, people are like, oh, well, you haven't met in person. We're all digital. They all bemoan the digital thing. But I can say that on this phone call alone, and at crucial times of my life, I've happened to jump on a Joe call and the guest has said something profound or that moved me or that changed my life. I've had friends, and I call them friends, in the Narrator's Cup of Joe. Some of them are in this audience right now that have reached out and said the thing at just the moment I needed to hear it. So to me, it's silly. I don't work, you can see them at a coffee cooler. I've had people that I know in this community, the writers, people I've met that have changed my life profoundly in a 1-hour phone call on Zoom. And I just think to me, that's a big, big deal.
And isn't that what books do?
Yeah.
Books tend to drop into our laps at the right time.
Yes.
And
yes.
change our lives in profound ways.
Yes.
Yeah, there's not many other things in life that are from someone's brain to another neutral medium, if they're just reading it, words, and then into your brain as a reader. And now, you can add in the audiobook level of a guide, like the performer. It's still extremely personal, and we need stories. And again, I never miss, and this is completely genuine because of the what it has taken to get to this point, but for the narrators that are on this call, I am in awe of your ability and your art and what you're able to do. And that's coming from a very ignorant author when I was researching that book to know what it takes to go in there. And so, you don't need my permission, but maybe I can say this, that when an author was ever going to critique you, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So hopefully they will, and appreciate your art and craft. And
the key is for us to help them, because for us, we have to step on our throne and be who we are. If you're a professional, you're a professional. You're here to give good guidance. And if you start the relationship like that, then it can grow. I think I say this every time. I'm going to ask you guys for a final quick sentence, but I do say this every time, but this was truly the call I needed tonight. And I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight. I think this call had deep, deep meaning for me tonight, for reasons I won't go into, but deep, deep meaning. And I'm very, very grateful for all your time. And can we please wrap up with, I'll start with Landon because he's here, and then we'll jump to Scott. If you could leave with one sentence, final last words what would you like the YouTube audience in 60 years to just take away, if anything, from this call?
Well, I did look at what I said for the call a year ago, and I still stand by that in terms of looking up my daughters and telling them that I love them, because I'll be gone by then, and that you as creators are enough, and that I do stand by that. In the current predicament that we're in this real kind of interesting point in creative times with technology, I'm going to borrow from Shakespeare here and my old collegiate textbook that I used in the end of the Blue Hour Sanction that Suzanne will be performing. And one of the villains, it's set 20 years ago, and one of the villains is really trying to utilize the beginnings of AI and technology. And I went back to the play As You Like It. And so I am not a narrator, but if you would permit me to read this, it's a few sentences. Can I break the rules,
We
Daniela?
would love it. We would love it.
Okay. So this is what it made me think of. As You Like It invites its characters and its audiences to suspend the rules of everyday existence and to imagine different realities. What if we could have the world as we like it? Shakespeare's title invites us to contemplate that very question. What do we like? What do we desire? And by extension, how could the world be rearranged to accommodate those desires and wishes? The relationship of the natural to the artificial is a topic fundamental to pastoral. That is, are what human beings have made, cities, gardens, systems of social hierarchy, preferable to the simplicity and lack of artifice supposedly found in rural settings and communities? Such debates continue today as we frequently long for simpler, slower lives, but find it hard to wean ourselves off from all the sophisticated conveniences of modern life. The choices weren't easier in the early modern period, when courts and cities had pleasures and attractions, as well as vices and corruptions. And so when I think about where we're at, I think we all yearn for simplicity. And I just hope that the YouTube audience in 60 years, I just watched the movie Oppenheimer and it made me think of this. I hope we've left you with something better. I sincerely hope we've left you with something better. And I died trying to do that.
I believe we have the strength of human spirit. I love that. Thank you, Landon. Scott, how do you top that now?
Yeah, well, yeah. And no pressure, Landon. Thanks.
I think I've got to get on the Zoom call right now.
First of all, I want to say thank you. I just allowed myself to look since we were at the end, I allowed myself to look at the chat. Kim, thank you for pointing out that Fikri as a film is on Hulu right now. We have still never seen it, so if nothing else, we'll be checking it out.
I
I'll be
want to see it.
squealing like a fanboy when it happens. It's a genuinely lovely story. So
Fikry, right?
Fikry, and it's called The Storied Life of A.J. Fikri. It's a book about a bookseller.
Okay, I'm so checking it out.
And the audiobook I loved by Gabrielle Zevin, Zevin. So I highly recommend that, even though I'm the one who did it. So the thing I would want to leave with an audience in 60 years is I'm trusting that audiobooks are still going to be done in 60 years. I'm trusting that humanity is smart enough to know to not turn storytelling over to the machines. So what I would like to say is, and for the audience in 60 years, but also for everybody in this room, for when you're creating a relationship with an author, remember that old adage that talks about how Brits and Americans are separate societies joined by a common language, right? Well, actually, no, it says that we are societies separated by a common language.
Yeah,
I should get
that's definitely true.
separated by a common language. The fact of the matter is, when you're working with an author, you both speak the same language, but you don't understand each other's accent. Your author may not understand what you need from them, and they are not going to understand what they need from you. But those are the steps that you take. Understand that we both want the same thing. We want an end product. We want to tell stories that will make children dream decades after that we are gone.
I love that.
But if you, well, I ripped it off from Neil Gaiman.
I really love that.
But as Daniela said, present your intro package. Make sure that you know what to address. Make sure you can look at the work that you've done. If you've done audiobooks before, if not, you learn on this first several books as you're working with a new author. Where did the relationship fall short? What could you be doing better? What could they be doing better if you just let them know, hey, I need more of this from you. I need less of this from you. Teach each other how to understand each other's accents so that you are truly speaking this common language.
I like that. I love that. Yeah, I love
Well,
that.
what else was I going to say to try to follow up with?
I know. No, this is.
I was cheated. I was reading. I was cheating.
No, but this, thank you very much. This was truly the call I needed tonight. And judging by all the happy, smiling faces in the audience, I speak for all of us. So thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much, Landon. It's been a pure joy. And thank you to the gorgeous studio audience. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Daniela, for having us on.
Thanks for having us. It's always
And
great.
love the cover, by the way. The blue heron cover. Oh my God.
Yeah, Scott's
Those are the two upcoming titles
right now, Huron Nights. Yeah, Scott's recording that right now, so I'm excited to hear it come out.
They're
I'm working
gorgeous.
on that one now. Suzanne's doing the other next month. So.
I need a good book to listen to at night. I've run out of audiobooks to listen to at night, so hurry. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much, you guys. Mwah! Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.